Good morning. Today is Thursday, June 25th, 2020. And I'd like to share with you something that I learned from an essay by Rabbi Leib Zalisch. Leib is a young scholar of note. I knew him when he was a little boy, and gives tremendous nachas to be able to read his Divrei Torah and learn from them, and now to share them with others. Because they are very, very worthwhile. So, what is it that we know about God? Last night I was FaceTiming with my grandson, and he's almost 5 years old, and so he had some questions about God. Where is God? How does he get from here to there? What clothes does he wear? Excellent questions. So I gave him the answers that I thought were correct, that he would be able to understand. And then he said, okay, Saba, but I'm going to go look it up on Google to get the right answer. And I'll come back and tell you what Google says is the right answer. Okay, that's fine. So, but what is it that we can know about God? Well, we don't know anything about God's essence that is beyond human comprehension. But we know the way we relate to God. We know the midos, the characteristics that we experience God expressing. That is what we know of God. And that is most famously described in the line that we refer to as the Yud Gimel midos, the 13 attributes that start with the words Hashem, Hashem, Kel, Rachum, V'chanun, Erach Apayim, Rav Chesed Emes, 13 attributes of God, and we understand those are 13 attributes with which He deals with us, with the world. If you look at that list, number 7 and number 8. Number 7 is Rav Chesed. Chesed means kindness or compassion. Rav Chesed means abundant kindness or compassion, and that means that God extends Himself in kindness and compassion, in benevolence, beyond the point for which it is warranted, more than is needed or even seems appropriate. Abundant kindness. But then comes the word Emes. Emes means truth. Emes means the strict letter of the law. So these two terms seem to be contradictory. One is talking about abundant kindness that doesn't stop, that goes farther than it's even warranted. And then Emes says, no, exactly what you deserve, exactly what it is, strict. And the truth is, we find these two terms, chesed and emes, together in a number of passages in the Torah and in a number of places in our prayers, in Tehillim as well. And so to understand how these two concepts of chesed and emes can somehow be connected with each other, we turn to the writing of Rabbi Shamshon Hirsch. Rabbi Shamshon Hirsch says that the Hebrew word chesed is connected to the word ashade, which means to cascade, to overflow the borders or the boundaries. And therefore, Hirsch explains, if you have chesed that is overflowing the boundaries, you have to have emes next to it to preserve the true meaning of the kindness. In other words, you have to have kindness, but then you have to have truth that doesn't lose sight of the values for which you are trying to use that kindness. Without truth, chesed can go too far. Emes is there to anchor chesed and to ensure that the chesed is proportionate and is always directed to the truth of what the goal is. So Hirsch shares two examples of this. And they are fascinating examples that hold tremendous lessons for us. The first is near the end of the book of Bereshis. When Yaakov is about to die, so now Yaakov and his entire family are in Egypt. The famine has ended. They are going to be there for a certain amount of time. And then they are going to leave. It's going to be a few hundred years and come back to Israel, but that's in the future. Just before Yaakov dies, he calls his son Yosef. Yosef is not the oldest son, but Yosef is the most important ruler in Egypt, and he's the one that will have the power and the authority to grant the wish that Yaakov is going to express as his last wish. Vayikrevu Yemei Yisrael Lamus, and the day of Yaakov's death was approaching. Yaakov understood that his life was coming to an end. Vayikra Livno Yosef, and Yaakov called to his son Yosef, and he said to him, "Please come and take an oath, v'asisa imadi chesed ve'emes, and do for me chesed, kindness, ve'emes, and truth. Al not tikbareni b'mitzrayim. Do not bury me in Egypt. Take my body back to Israel and bury me in the cave that I purchased near Hebron." The phrase chesed ve'emes, do for me a kindness and a truth, is jarring. It doesn't seem to have a place within the context of what's being discussed. But Hirsch explains, based on his principle before, and he explains as follows. Yaakov knew that Yosef would make sure that his burial would be proper. Remember, when Yaakov came to Egypt, the entire famine ended. The entire people of Egypt had reason to revere and respect Yaakov and to want at his passing to pay tribute to him. That is a national issue. Yaakov understood that Yosef would want, out of chesed, out of kindness, to show the greatest kindness, to have the most elaborate and respectful state funeral in Egypt. And that's the kindness. The kindness is to provide the greatest tribute with the most people at the highest level, with the most dignitaries. That would be a funeral in Egypt. Yaakov says to Yosef, no, I want you to do chesed, but it's got to be connected to emes. It has to be connected to the truth of the ultimate value, which is my highest priority, and that is to be buried in Israel. Because that's where my past is, and that is where our future is, that is where my wife is, and my father, and my grandfather, and that's the truth of where I want to be. So whatever chesed is in your mind that will be pomp and circumstance and elaborate, but it has to be tempered by the emes, it's got to be in Israel. And if you can't fulfill the emes, that the burial must be in Israel, I don't want the chesed of the fancy funeral in Egypt. Having chesed and emes next to each other in this narrative tells us that the burial would be an act of chesed, but that would not have been enough for what Yaakov wanted. Yaakov wanted chesed and emes, and the emes could not be neglected. The emes was the value, the truth of what Yaakov wanted. And so here we see the goal of emes is to keep chesed in check, in place. A second context, and from here we're going to be able to learn an amazing lesson. An earlier place in the book of Bereshis where these two terms come into play. Earlier in the Torah, after Sarah dies, Abraham wants to provide to find a wife for his son Yitzchak. And he calls his servant, we understand the servant's name is Eliezer, although it's not specifically mentioned in the Torah, but that's what we understand. We'll call him Eliezer. And he says to Eliezer, I want you to go on a journey, and I want you to find a wife for my son, for Yitzchak. And then he says, Vashbiacha b'Hashem Elokei Hashamayim v'Elokei Haaretz. But I want you to swear, he says to Eliezer, that as you are going to search for a wife for my son, for Yitzchak, I want you to swear, Asher lo sikach isha livni bimnos haknani, Asher anochi yoshe b'kirbo. Do not select a woman who lives among the Canaanite nations where we currently dwell now. Ki im el artzi vel moladati telech v'lakachti isha livni liyitzchak. Go back to my family. It must be a woman who comes from my family, back from the place where I was born. The chesed of this is to find a wife for Yitzchak. That's the chesed, to find the best wife, the most fitting wife, the most beautiful inside and outside wife. That's the chesed. The emes is, but there's a limit. And there's a limit, the limit is that there's a value that is non-negotiable. She must be from my family, not from any other people. So there's chesed on the one hand, and there's emes, and the emes puts a brake on the chesed. Okay. So now let's review how this narrative unfolds. Eliezer travels back to the place where Avram was born. He sees a young woman. And even before that, he says the following words. Vayomar, Hashem Elokei Adoni Avraham. He prays to God, the master of Abraham. Hakra na lefanai hayom. Let this woman come before me today. Let this be the day that I find the right woman for Yitzchak. Va'aseh chesed im Adoni Avraham. And perform an act of chesed, kindness, for Avraham. Hold on a second. Perform an act of kindness for Avraham. And then he says, V'hine anochi nitzav alein hamayim. I will stand by the well, and as the young women come by to draw water for the well, I will see the woman who will offer water to me, a stranger, and not only to me, but she'll offer water to the camels. She is the one that is chosen. But hold on a minute. That's not what Avram said. Right? First of all, Avram said he wanted to find a wife for Yitzchak. Now, we understand that that's an act of chesed, but Avram did not say anything about the woman being a person who acts with chesed as being the right person. Okay, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I think we all want that, certainly coming from Avram's household, where kindness and compassion is so important. Maybe that was understood, but why is it that Eliezer is setting up a criteria that is based only on chesed? And he says it again in Pasuk Yud Dalet. V'haya hanara asher omar eleh hatina kadech. And the woman that I shall say to her, could I please have some water? And she will say to me, not only will I give you water, but I will also give your camels water to drink. Listen to these words. This is his prayer to God. That will be the proof that this is the one. That will be the proof that this is the one. Ki asisa chesed im Adoni, that you have performed, you God are performing an act of kindness for my master. Wait a second. But what happened to the Emes? He's only looking for chesed. he's not even asking about, is she from Abraham's family? But Abraham made it clear that that's the deal breaker. That's the chesed. I'm sorry, that's the Emes. How can Eliezer make this prayer to God to say, if I see a woman who does this act of chesed, that proves she's the right one? It won't prove she's the right one if she's not related to Abraham, if she's not from Abraham's family. There's no indication of that. Eliezer seems to have left out the Emes part of what Abraham insisted on. Abraham said, if it's not from my family, no go. Only later in the narrative, after he sees this young woman, after she brings water not only for him, but also for his animals, after that, in Pasuk Gimel, Eliezer says, Vayomer bas miat. He says to this woman, who are you? Vatomer elav, and she says to him, Bas Besuel anochi, I am the daughter of Besuel, who is Ben Milcah, Asher Yolda leNachar, the son of Milcah, the son of Nachar, which of course is Abraham's family. So imagine how shocked Eliezer must have been at that moment, because he had, forgotten, ignored that part of the requirement that she has to be related to Abraham's family. He was only looking for the chesed. He was so excited that he found the chesed. But now he learns not only is it chesed, but it's also emes. It's also the value. It's also what Abraham insisted on. So he's amazed. He's shocked. It's a miracle. Vayikod ha'ish vayishtachu l'Hashem, and he bows down to God, because this is really a miracle. Out of all the women in the world, this one kind woman is also related to Abraham. And listen to the last pasuk. Vayomer, and he says a prayer of thanks to God. Baruch Hashem Elokei Adoni Abraham. Blessed are you, God, the master of Abraham. Asher lo azav chasto va'amito me'im Adoni. That you did not desist from providing chesed and emes from my master, from Abraham. Here we see Eliezer has realized that there needs to be chesed and emes. It's the first time this phrase appears within this narrative. God did not provide him pure chesed, which would have simply meant finding a beautiful woman and a nice woman that he would be able to bring back for Yitzchak, because that would have meant abandoning the emes that Abraham had expressed. But Eliezer was able to find a woman who matched both the chesed and the emes. And now Eliezer understood something. And the point of all of this is that we are supposed to learn this lesson as well. And that is, chesed without emes is not chesed. Chesed, an abundance of love, feeling you want to just do everything you can for someone, without being anchored in values and specifics of emes, it's not even a chesed. Emes stands to keep an eye on chesed. Let me give you a perfect example. The Rambam Maimonides famously writes about 8 levels of tzedakah, of charity. 8 levels, one higher than the other. How qualitatively high a mitzvah of tzedakah is does not depend on the amount of money. It depends on the way in which it's given. The highest level is when you do not give any tzedakah, but rather you help a person find a job so that they are able to support themselves. Because then you have not only made that person a recipient of your goodwill, you have given that person the ability to earn for themselves and to retain their own self-esteem. That's the highest level of tzedakah. But here's the thing. in order to do that, you've got to pull back on your chesed. Someone comes to ask you for help, you might think, well, I'll give him $100. But if you have the opportunity to provide a way to get a job, you need to pull back and not act as you might initially think through only chesed, just give whatever you have, give whatever he needs, but rather to create a situation where he will be able to help himself, because that becomes a greater chesed. So in this example, chesed, when it is tempered by emes, provides greater chesed, not less. And chesed, when it is devoid of emes, is actually not a chesed at all. This is how we understand God's character. And we are called upon to emulate this, chesed ve'emes. We must always act with chesed, with kindness and compassion. And we should feel that we want it to be abundant and want it to be overflowing. But it must always accord with our values, with the truth of what we are trying to accomplish. And therefore, chesed must always be connected to emes, just as emes must always be connected to chesed. My friends, have a wonderful day. I wish you well, and I look forward to seeing all of you soon in person.